and only Michael F. Schein joining us. He's a two-time guest on This Week with Sabir. He's the mastermind behind the best-selling book, The Hype Handbook, available on wherever popular books are sold, like Amazon and such, and the founder of MicroFame Media, a company that turns unknown businesses into household names. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one because we're talking about building amazing secret societies. It's a very intriguing topic. Michael, welcome to the show again.
Hello, Sabir. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. I always love talking with you. This will be fun.
Yep, definitely. So you're a two-time guest on our show, right? I'm not SNL, so I don't have a jacket to give you, but on, as you can see under your name, it says X2, right?
Yeah.
And I've
Well,
had
thank
very
you.
few guests among the 100 episodes I've done so far that I've had guests repeat. But this was very intriguing when you and I connected about secret societies. We can definitely dive deep into it. So since your last visit, where we discussed the Hype Handbook in quite a detail in the other episode, and we will link it to this episode too, so people can check out that one too. Uh, how has the release of the book affected your business?
It's been a big deal. Thank you for asking, because when I was on the show the first time, it was pretty soon after the book release, and time does fly. It's been about 2 years since the book was released, and we were a successful business before. That being said, even though we use the principles of what I call hype, where I look at non-traditional marketers, their strategies to more traditional businesses, we always framed ourselves as a marketing agency because that's what people knew. It was really hard to tell people, hey, we do this weird thing called hype. We went out and we marketed ourselves as a marketing agency. And ever since the book has come out, I've been fortunate that it's gotten a lot of attention. Now I get phone calls and emails that say, hey, I want some of that hype stuff. I want to become a hype artist. So now I'm in exactly the position I've wanted to be in a long time, where I've become sort of known as the hype guy. And other than the things you would expect, where it's really driven a lot of business, it's really changed some elements of our business. So for example, now when we work with clients, we go hype strategy to hype strategy. So we'll focus on like hype strategy 1, which is make war, not love, which is about having a very firm point of view. And we'll dig really deeply into that, and we'll build experiments so that they can use that strategy to drive all kinds of attention and emotion around whatever they're selling. And I no longer have to explain what that means, because the book kind of did a lot of that groundwork for me. So that's been really exciting and really fun. And, the speaking gigs are nice, getting to go and speak to these concepts in front of audiences, and the press appearances. The sort of egomaniac in me who dreamed of being interviewed as a novelist on TV shows or in a band sort of likes that part as well.
You're feeding that part of your
Yeah, exactly.
So you just mentioned that you shifted. I think that's what you said. You shifted your business model, right, from more like a marketing agency or strategy agency to becoming this hype agency. And how did that change come about, and how did you implement it, and what actually triggered you to make that change?
So it's really interesting. So I've been running this business in one form or another for about 11 or 12 years. And when I had a more traditional agency model where we would bring on a client and handle their marketing, if they wanted social media done, we would handle the social media. If they wanted copywriting done, we would handle the copywriting. If they wanted PR done, we would handle the PR. We did it our way, but we were sort of their go-to marketing person. Although we always got good results, which is why we stayed in business so long and why we grew and why I got the opportunity to, write the book, really, because McGraw-Hill, they want you to be a good writer, but they also want successful business people. I really learned something interesting about human nature. I mean, you've heard that concept of what is it? Under promise, over deliver. I'm not sure I agree with that, because what I found was that whatever you deliver becomes the new standard, right? So when you deliver at a very high level for a client, they expect that going forward, which is great. But the problem is the clients don't bake the principles of marketing or hype or sales, whatever you want to call it, into their DNA. So the kind of thing that would happen was, and I would do this if I were on the client side, it's human nature. When you hire someone, especially at a premium, to do your work for you, psychologically, you just kind of feel like you're waving a magic wand and getting that service handled, getting that marketing handled. The problem is, of course, you're selling Coca-Cola. It's okay to just hire an advertising firm to put Coke ads all over. But if you're selling ideas, which a lot of these businesses are, they're services, they need to build sort of an audience around the founder or the leader or the ideas. If you just abdicate the marketing of that to an agency, go do it. It's a lot of tough conversations have to happen. So we would have things in the extreme where we would book big press interviews for people, and our clients, very well-meaning people, would show up and completely disregard everything we trained them on. Or sometimes they wouldn't show up at all, and we'd ask why, and they'd say, we're very, very busy. And I realized it wasn't their fault. It was this idea that, hey, we hired a marketer. The marketing magic will just happen. So when we changed our model, what we did was we said, look, we know that these mass psychology principles that we're calling hype work. We've looked at propaganda artists, we've looked at activists, we've looked at con artists, we've looked at legendary rock stars, and we've distilled those mass psychology principles to reapply them ethically. So we know that works. So we know that we can build marketing campaigns, build experiments, build actions that are based on those principles. We know we can give you the tools to execute. We know we can come up with the ideas. We know we can iterate until it works. But if they don't put one foot in front of the other to at least try the experiment, we found that they never owned it. So now what we do is we have our clients go out into the world and execute with us by their side. And the craziest thing is the results have been so much better. I mean, we got good results before, but ever since we made that little change where our clients have to have a little skin in the game, we've had a Instagram viral star. We've had a major conference launched as a result of what we came up with that drove millions of dollars worth of business. So it was just such an interesting lesson in psychology. You would think that the more you do for clients in terms of actual grinding, the better it would be. But sometimes if you set up a framework and a process that actually makes them better for the long run, everyone does better. So that was a really cool lesson in psychology and business and sociology.
I mean, in what I experience with my clients, I have different types of clients. I mean, that you just kind of sparked an idea in my head. Some of them is, I want to do it myself. Just give me the principles, teach me what needs to be done. I'm going to do it myself. That's DIY, right? And then you have your do it for me, right? Here's a bunch of money, take it and just make your magic happen, right? Here we go. Here's how much do you cost? It costs this much. Here we go. I'm going to give you the money. And a lot of companies and a lot of brands, as you know, they hire agencies and say, well, you're my agency. This is a new product coming out. Go and launch it for me, right? And that's it. And they get not involved. And I think the middle ground, which is a hybrid model, do it with me, right? So I want to understand the principles as you're executing it, but explain to me, hold my hand, but I will pull the trigger. I want to be able to aim. I would like to at least understand what am I aiming at and what do I want to do?
Well, with all respect to the companies who do everything for their clients, because there are a lot of good ones, I'm sure, we have what you're calling the hybrid model, not because we want to do less work, but because our clients get a better result. So in other words, yeah, if you're selling an online course, here, I'm going to teach you your stuff. Of course, that's a do-it-yourself model. But what I found was it's kind of like when, I don't mean to compare my extremely successful clients to children, but you can say I'm a really great parent because when my kid asks for cake, I give it to them. And when my kid wants to stay up late, I let them stay up late. Or you could say, I'm a really great parent because I support my children and I give them structure and I teach them and I even do things for them before they can do it themselves. But my ultimate goal is to raise a strong adult. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying it's like a hybrid model, like, hey, we do it with you. It's a model where we're trying to turn them into what I call hype artists, make it so that even if they're not with us in the future, they're seeing and interacting with the world a whole new way. Every action that they take is generating all kinds of attention. The way Gary Vaynerchuk does, who we both have met, and in your case, you know very well. He doesn't put a dividing line between marketing and selling wine. He lives that stuff, right? And that's something that's really great about him. So yeah, it's not like we give, we're not like, oh, we decided to sell to more people and do a cut rate model for less money. No, I mean, if I have to edit people's stuff, I edit people's stuff. I'm there to have them be successful. It's just that we found that model of letting them put some skin in the game so that they make the mistakes on their own and come back to us for support makes it so that the entire company grows. And the way we make sure it's the entire company is once we get a winning experiment, we document the heck out of it. And then we make sure the team is trained on how to use it. So it starts with just some thinkers up top, maybe the founder, maybe the CMO. But once we hit that experiment and we've gone through that hard work and we've tweaked and iterated, now we document it with on paper, in print and on video. And now we're inculcating the entire organization. So I actually think, from my perspective, it's more valuable than just, hey, I'll push the buttons on Twitter for you and hopefully something works.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you document something, right? You
Exactly.
put it on the factory floor, you put it on a whiteboard, blackboard, Zoom board, whatever. Now it's written. When they see that,
Forever.
oh, the number
Yeah.
is 46 and we
Right.
suck and it's a letter grade C, right? We need to take that letter grade C and move it up to a B, or
That's
by
it.
the next quarter we need to get to A minus, or by the end of this year we should be around A minus, right?
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And we use a scoring system. It's not quite that system, but we know what makes, as I call it, a hype campaign, what other people call a marketing campaign. We know what makes it work for the long run. So whenever people, whether it's our clients, the executive suite, or us going out into the world, we're tweaking that score until it's all fours, and only then do we document it. So I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, and I don't know how much your audience needs to know the ins and outs, but suffice it to say, we have our version of the grading system. That's very, very important.
you just used the two terms, hype and marketing, interchangeably, but I think you have a very specific POV on how those two things are very different.
I
Hype
do. I just
versus
got a little. I
marketing.
do. I just got a little lazy with the terms because I know that people think of them as the same, and because I think there was a time, at its best, marketing should be what I think of as hype, right? I mean, marketing really should be driving attention and getting people emotional about what you're selling so that they'll buy it. But if that were the case anymore, why do we have so many? God bless them, but why do we have so many marketing professionals who really know their way around HubSpot and really know their way around Hootsuite, but if they had to run their own businesses, wouldn't get one sale? It's because they're marketing professionals, right? But it's almost as if they forgot what marketing is. So what marketing's become is knowing the right buttons to push on the right technology. I can't tell you how many times I've hired professional marketers and had to, unfortunately, let them go because they come in and they raise all kinds of smoke and energy and spreadsheets and outbound emails and this and that. And when you dig through the dross and you say, how many sales did we get as a result of your activities? There's nothing, right? So I consider hype to be any set of activities that generate a huge amount of emotion to get people to take an action that you want them to take. And it can be a really awful action. It can be a really great action. It can be completely down the middle, but it's amoral. It's neither moral nor immoral. I want to teach people to use these strategies to make the world a better place. But the other reason I use hype, and I got the term from hip hop actually, but the reason I use that term is because I often find that the best, let's just call them marketers, the people who do what marketing should do, are usually on average not the professional marketers, right? Like you look at a marketing professional in a Fortune 500, a director of marketing in a Fortune 500 corporation, they're probably fine. But you look at, gosh, I don't know, Calvin Klein, who would never call himself a professional marketer, or Richard Branson, or that person who started the Hare Krishnas, or
or Elon Musk,
or Alice Cooper's manager, these people would never say, or heads of new religions, televangelists, these people would never say that they're marketing professionals. In fact, they would say, I'm not a marketing professional. But you'll find that their understanding of human nature is just so excellent, and it's really consistent. You look at Elon Musk and the head of a televangelist church, and you take the content out, and they're doing the same thing. They're playing the same beings.
Yeah, exactly. Like you are playing with people's emotions, right?
Yeah.
Either you're pointing to a pain point and then you're really, really squeezing it, that it feels even more painful, and then you're giving them a lotion, right?
Yeah, and I think at its best too. I mean, if this was all just about like the pain point thing, which I do think is a big part of it, that's a bleak world to be in, although it's necessary. But I think at its best, hype can add a lot of color to the world. It can really, the other side of the pinpoint is transcendence, right? I mean, I remember having this experience. I may have mentioned this last time because I use this story a lot. But when I was in high school, I was flipping around the channels, which is something you did back then. But we did have cable. So on one channel, there was a documentary about the Grateful Dead. And on the other channel was a documentary about, it wasn't a documentary, it was a televangelist thing. So there were people in the audience, a faith healing thing. So I was flipping back and forth. And in the Grateful Dead audience, all of these people were flopping around with their long hair and losing themselves. And in the televangelist audience, everyone had short hair and button-up shirts, but they were all flopping around and doing this. And I was like, wow, the content of this message is completely different, but these people are feeling a sense of transcendence. And both of them, as long as they're not giving their money away, are feeling that their lives are enriched by the thing, right? So, and I'm a big music fan. I've had that experience with those kind of charismatic musicians who, David Bowie or whatever, who really bring people up. So I don't know, it can make the world a more colorful place when applied correctly.
I mean, if the music is speaking to you, speaking to your soul, and you're getting some meaning out of it, versus whether it's a sermon by a priest or a TV evangelist or someone like that, you're relating to what he or she is saying to you on TV or on the, what do you call that, pulpit, I guess, right? That's you're believing it, you're relating to it, right? You're engaging with that, and both are engagements. It's just two different platforms,
And I guess to add to that, we tend to think that it's just the music or it's just the words of the preacher, but the packaging is a big part of what makes you lose yourself. So like if David Bowie, I use that example because I'm a fan, but also because he's very theatrical. For years, he would just get up and strum his guitar and no one cared. And then he decided to like clothe himself basically as a space alien, bisexual space alien named Ziggy Stardust with his painted face and his orange hair and all this. And people, you see the crowds at his shows and they're just swept away. And there's a reason that, for example, the Catholic Church has stained glass and incense, and there's a reason, and huge cathedrals. The packaging, the ritual, the theatricality is part of what people lose themselves in. A lot of times we think, hey, I'm losing myself. That's just sort of an add-on. That's partially what's making you lose yourself in it. People don't want to think that. But I would say if you're a fan, it opens the door for you to get the message, whereas you might be closed to it otherwise.
We're actually kind of jumping into our topic now, right? And I want to focus, because you talk about this in your Hype Handbook, right? The secret societies, right? Even though like the Catholic Church, followers of Islam, Muslims, and Judaism, Hindus, Buddhists, those are gigantic societies, right? But there are secret societies, and what was his name? Kubrick, Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Interesting movie.
So there are very secret societies also that I just want to dive into that concept, and then how can understanding that improve our businesses and the businesses that we are in.
Well, yeah, there's a chapter in the book called Build Your Secret Society. And I sort of used it to be playful, But as I got deeper into it, I started studying real secret societies. And we'll talk about those in a minute. But you were talking about religion. And another very large religion is the Mormon Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints, right? And massive religion, not a secret society. However, whenever they build a new Mormon church, but a Mormon temple, which only Mormons are allowed to go into, there's a small period of time before they consecrate the temple. You know, I guess I don't want to get this wrong, but I think they do certain prayers. I mean, I'm sure someone will correct me, but they consecrate the temple. That non-Mormons are allowed to go in to the temple. And it's a building, you know, nice looking building, but a building. And people will come from all around to walk into this temple, you know, and nothing's going to change the next day physically about the temple. So this idea that you can't see something, that there's an exclusivity or an elitism. I mean, I would go if I was anywhere nearby. I'm curious, right? So I think the concept of the secret society, you know, all throughout modern history, at least, who knows about antiquity, but modern history, there have been groups of people who have gotten together and they've had insider rituals. You know, they met under certain names. Sometimes you couldn't know who was in it. Sometimes you did, but people would identify themselves by certain badges that they wore or certain handshakes or whatever. They would famously, for the Freemasons, which is one of the most famous of these, there's a checkerboard floor always, you know. And when you get to the bottom of a lot of these secret societies, they're really kind of just like social clubs, almost like drinking clubs. But for some reason, people are fascinated by them. People just want to be involved with it. And what it comes down to is when you share ritual with someone, when you share a secret with someone, it bonds you to them. So some of these groups were some of the greatest forms of networking that people have ever engaged in. You know, the founding fathers were all part of the Freemasons, right? So it's almost like we think that there are these secret societies controlling civilization and they do the Da Vinci Code and all these movies. But what it is the kinds of people who know how the world really works, the kinds of people who understand that everything is about connections, form these groups. They get involved in organizations and they understand the role of theater and pageantry, right? Like they understand that going to a mastermind group and sitting in a boardroom with fluorescent lights beaming down and saying, okay, everyone trade leads. Let's see, can we recommend leads? While you might do that for business, it's not something you would ever in a million years do unless you had a commercial imperative. And as a result, you don't really get that close to the people in them. But if you create an experience around what many people call networking, suddenly it no longer is networking. Those people become your brothers, right? People call it brothers or sisters. And brothers will do anything for brothers. Sisters will do anything for sisters. Networking partners or mastermind group fellows, you know, they help each other, but it's transactional. So I started studying the dynamics at play, and it turns out you don't have to necessarily form a formal secret society to benefit from some of these dynamics in your regular professional life.
Now, how do I use that? Like, let's say if so mastermind is a very interesting topic. I actually this season I had a guest. He's phenomenal at building mastermind groups.
Yeah.
You know, that's what he does. That's what he does on a full-time basis. That's what he consults on, builds them, helps them grow, and things of that nature. So a lot of, and even I have been thinking about mastermind groups for my business.
I've been in them and they've been useful to me. Yeah.
Yep. So how do you, what type of companies, let's go with that example, right? What type of examples do you have of companies where it makes sense for you to have these, not necessarily mastermind groups, but these secret societies? Is the VIP club part of Nordstrom private sale? Is that considered a secret society because they do private sale and it's exclusive to a very small group of people, not just email marketing, where you actually go and meet and get access to special collections?
Well, I'd like to answer this in two ways, one in a direct way and one in a roundabout way, if that's okay with you, right?
It's perfectly fine.
So I think my favorite example of how the secret society dynamic can work, and remember, it's a dynamic. I'm not saying start a new Freemasons. I'm saying learn from secret societies and take the pieces that work. But, you know, when I was a teenager, so I'm 45 years old, school between 1991 and 1995. So the music that was the most popular was alternative rock and grunge and like certain kinds of hip hop, right? And the band Pearl Jam at that time was one of many grunge bands, one of the biggest, and their fans were young. A lot of girls, actually, compared to Nirvana, they were the more like pretty boy like band, and young men, but certainly all young people and that sort of thing. And at that early stage, Pearl Jam created a thing called the 10 Super Fan. You would sign up to this mailing list. Now, it is 2023. I'm 45. Most of those grunge bands have died off. The ones that are around are typically playing casinos at this point because rock music is at its low of popularity, especially that kind of rock music. But if you go to a Pearl Jam concert all those years later, they play arenas, sold out arenas all year long. And all of their audience is middle-aged men now. No, not a lot of young people, but hundreds of thousands, millions of middle-aged men across the country, 30,000 people at a show. Because there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of the reasons is their fans are obsessed with them. I have a friend who's been a Pearl Jam fan since he was 15, and once in a while, he'll just get backstage passes in the mail. Or once in a while, he'll get like a special song on like a vinyl record that no one else can get. And it's like their way of saying, like, you're one of us. You may not be up on stage playing, but you've been our fan since 1993. And you're essentially part of Pearl Jam. And only some people are in it. I'm not sure you can still join the 10 Club. It might only be for those early fans. But those fans will sing. They will bring 20 people to a Pearl Jam show. They'll travel 1,000 miles to go see the same show they saw last week. And I think that's the lesson. I think the lesson is, look, this is the roundabout way I was going to answer the question. My journey with this stuff is when I first went into business for myself, I took a sales class because I didn't know anything about sales. And one of the many things that the guy said was, you should network. You should do introductions and favors for people. You should go to networking events. So I did that. And it turns out, because of my personality, I'm good at that, right? So I would meet people. I would find ways to help them, not expect anything in return. People would want to take me under the wing, and I would get leads. That being said, those people wouldn't live and die for me. Like I was networking at kind of a low financial level because I was a new business person. And those people I was networking with, they'd refer leads to me because they felt obligated to. But then the leads would be at a low financial level too, so they couldn't afford me. And I was still eking out a living. And when I changed from I want to network to I want to build a circle of interesting, influential, and powerful people around myself who I'd love to hang out with anyway because they're really fascinating, but who have a whole lot of sway and who think of me as a friend and I think of them as a friend, that changed everything. So then the sort of things I started to do was I would run dinners. And in fact, you came to
I attended one of them. That was
and
fabulous.
And when I invite people to dinner, I'm not like, okay, we're going to go around the table and exchange leads. I invite a group of really fascinating people. That was a great group, right?
Oh, yeah. Phenomenal.
And some people are very financially high level. Some people are really leaders in their field. Some people are just interesting, And I put them in a room and they form a circle. And guess who's at the head? I'm not the literal head of the table, but I'm the guy. I'm that person. So that's not a formal secret society. But now we've had an experience together. I could see it in your eyes. I'm just going to say this because we're tearing. When we first met, you were really nice to me, but it was very professional. You know what I mean? I mean, it was like, okay, we're going to say now, hey, man, it's so good to see you. It's a whole different dynamic, right?
Yeah.
And so it's that what I'm not saying start a formal secret society, although that might work. I'm saying look at what they do. Look at how they create a feeling of camaraderie and brotherhood rather than just like taking business cards or adding to LinkedIn and jamming out a bunch of introductions, which is what people do. And it goes somewhere, but it's not what the big players do.
It's funny. You just reminded me. It's just a little figment in my head of something that happened to me when I was young. I went into one of these networking groups because I was still growing up in my career. I went there. I met this one guy. He goes like, "Oh, we're supposed to be networking. Here's my business card." Did not say anything else. Here's my business card.
Right.
Gave it to me. Not even hello. I don't even know the person's name. Gave me a business card and walked away. And he was doing the same thing to everybody else
People
that he
do.
needed to give his business card to people. Like, what am I supposed to do with this business card? I don't even know you. You didn't even
Frankly,
tell me. Didn't even say hello.
That's the equivalent of going up to someone that you're interested, or going up to every woman or every man in a bar and saying, "This is a singles bar and we're here to try to copulate. So here's my phone number."
Yeah, exactly. That's very funny.
But that's what I mean. People, like, they don't think of it in human terms. They think of it as like, networking is a business development issue. We must exchange. I mean, I had a guy call me up. Someone introduced me to a guy once, networking or whatever. And the guy calls me up and I get on the phone and he says to me, without even a hello, "What can I do for you? How can I help you? What can I do?" And I'm like, why do you want, I'm thinking to myself, like, I understand that he read in a book somewhere that you should serve and you should, like, but I'm like, you don't even know me. How about, like, "Hey man, nice to meet you. Let's talk a little bit. Maybe you
Yeah.
don't want to help me. What if I'm a horrible person?"
Yeah, that's very funny.
And
So
I just want to say, you see that with fraternities. I wasn't in a fraternity, but especially in fraternities and like Ivy League schools, these kids go to school together and they're not there to network. They're getting drunk together and partying together and having fun together. And 25 years later, they'll meet up. And if someone has a deal, they'll do the deal with their fraternity brother, not because 25 years later they were trying to network, but because they bonded 25 years before, because they were in a
they have
common
that
group doing
relationship.
things together. Yeah, exactly.
So what I love for you to do is give like two or three examples of like well-known companies, like case studies that we can go dive into with secret societies where the implementation was successful.
Well, I'll give you an example of a gentleman that I've gotten to know pretty well. And he does this really well because it's done from such a genuine place. So there's a gentleman named Jeff Henningsen. I should say, I just got back a week ago from speaking to the company where he's at, this company Lockton. So Lockton is a $3 billion privately held insurance broker. And they do a lot of business to business insurance. Weirdly great vibe. Insurance can have a reputation sometimes. These guys provide, and I'm not just saying it because, they brought me out, because I just went and did a talk and some workshops. But this very, very, like, put the clients first kind of attitude. And I think the reason that is, the guy who founded the company, Jack Lockton, has a model where there's this Lockton umbrella, but every person in the company has to grow their own book of business to the point where they even have to stand out in the marketplace. They have to do their own, like, thought leadership development and all of this stuff. So this guy, Jeff Henningsen, he's one of their top producers. He's the president of the Texas series, which is like the Texas division. And he, even though it works for Lockton, but again, you're paid on the amount of business you close. He owns a company, separate company that he fully owns, called North Star. And a lot of his clients are in the private equity space. North Star is a company that is an event planning company. And he basically, he doesn't want to lose money on it. But the whole point of this company is that he brings investment bankers and people in that industry and private equity people and the people they might do deals with into a conference a couple times a year. He creates an amazing experience for them. They see the same people every year. The hotel is included, luxury hotel. And it's very efficient because they can all mingle together and know each other instead of flying around the country to do these deals. And the only thing Jeff does is he's the facilitator. He's not selling his insurance there, but they know that he has the ability, that he's the linchpin of this entire North Star community. The guy's one of the top 10 producers for a $3 billion company. The business just comes to him.
Wow.
Because he is like the linchpin of what is essentially a society. It's this North Star ecosystem. And the guy, if you speak to the guy, he's very soft-spoken, strong, but soft-spoken, very kind, never hard. I've never seen him pitch or hard sell. He doesn't have that schmoozy salesman thing that we often associate with salesmen. The business just comes to him. You know, he puts more into building North Star than I think he does pitching product. So that's a great example. I was blown away by him. And I think, yeah, I was really, really impressed by his method.
You know, when you build that relationship with a person, right, then it doesn't matter what you want to sell them. They actually come to you and go like, hey, I found out that you sell insurance.
That's right.
I have this insurance issue. Can you help me with this thing?
That's it.
Right? They come to you and say, not that you're going to them, hey, I pull this networking group together and here's my business card. And everybody gets 20% off for being here.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what it is. You know, he spends a lot of in-depth time with these people, and they know him. They know him as an organizer. They know him as a member of their clan. It's got a name, so they all think of themselves as North Star people. That's another thing. You know, I could know. You ever notice this? Like, you know, so I grew up in the United States. The United States is a very diverse country. Someone will run into, you know, you'll run into a Southerner in New York, you know, the Southerners, the Northerners, the Republicans, the Democrats. Then you go to Italy and you run into someone in line at one of the tourist things, and someone's from Mississippi and you're from New York City, and it's, hey man, oh my God, it's so nice to meet you. It's so good. Oh, an American, you know, and you're spending the whole day together, right?
Yeah.
Because you both have that capital A American and you're in Italy. There's something, we're very tribal, and beyond the fact that like spending time with people, if you can spend time with people in a setting where you're both members of the same tribe, the North Star tribe, or the Delta News, or the Freemasons, you know, just by having that common label, you know, it's like the blue team or the red team. You suddenly want to do things for those people. You want your team to win.
Yeah, actually, I was speaking somewhere, right, and we talked about like what makes like Apple iPhone products so sticky, right? The retention. We were talking about customer retention, right? And how is it so sticky, right? People, you know, people raise their hand. I was the one who was actually discussing this topic at the head of the table, right? They raise their hand. Oh, it's because of all the social apps. No, Android has social apps too. There, somebody else said something about, you know, it's the cloud. Yeah, well, yeah, Android has cloud too. It's called Google Cloud Platform, GCP, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's not it, you know. And then they went through this guessing game.
And
then,
Samsung is easier to use at this point.
Yep.
You know, I mean, people say.
So I said, you know, they guessed quite a lot, like 8 to 10 people. And then finally I said, like, no, it's the answer is very simple. It's actually a free app on each phone. It's called Apple iMessage. And there's a difference between blue people
100%.
and green people.
You're so right. I have had people say joking but not joking, oh no, you're one of the green people or whatever, you know, the other color is. It's so true.
So even at that level, you are segmented into two societies, right?
100%.
The green people they cannot get group chat, they cannot engage with you, they will miss out on messages, versus the blue people. Oh, that's good. If you have that group chat in a and then when you add people and one of them is green, you usually would drop them because that causes a lot of confusion.
You know, and Steve Jobs had that built into the DNA, dare I say, Hype, the secret society idea, into the DNA of the company from the beginning. So like the whole the ads with the Mac versus the PC, that's exactly what he did. What he was basically saying, he has a good looking hipster versus the sort of overweight schlubby John Hodgman. And the idea is, what he's really saying to you is, if you have a PC, you're an uncreative gray schlub. And if you have a Mac, you're an artistic, open-minded, creative person. And what's so funny about that is, even though they were at one point the highest valued company in the world. So I worked at this place called the Brooklyn Writer's Space, and it was in Park Slope, Brooklyn. You had to be a serious writer, a lot of novelists. I was a copywriter. But these people, you know, people didn't wear makeup. They only ate organic food. They were all hardcore liberals. None of them were consumerist. You had a few socialists in the room. You know how many PCs there were in there? 0. So you think that these people, I'm not into brands. You mean you're not into Dell, but you're into brands. It just has to be the right brand. It has to be your team's
You're wearing an Apple iWatch.
That's
you
what I mean.
have an iPhone. You're carrying a MacBook.
Right. But you're not into brands. No, you're not into brands that feel corporate. Yeah. You're into corporate brands that made themselves not feel corporate, though. No one would be caught dead with a PC in there. PCs work. They were writers. They're not doing graphic design. All you need, I mean, you could do that with a pad and paper and a pen.
Typewriter. Old
typewriter,
school.
or, a word processor, like just anything. I mean, computers have their benefits, but you don't really need a Mac.
Yeah.
And Macs are more expensive by a lot.
Yeah. Sometimes 3 to 4 times as much.
I mean, Dell at that time was like $350. I think a Mac was like $1,200.
Yeah, yeah. And if you go a little bit higher end, it even gets even more expensive.
Yeah.
Is there a particular successful example you could share that the entrepreneurs who are watching this show, that they can take it and say, okay, you know what, I can implement this for my business?
Like a piece of advice, like a way to sort of do, yeah. I think that having a name is such a simple thing, but having a certain group of clients or connections that share an identity and share a name is extremely valuable for the reasons we're saying. I mean, I think about Spartan Race, which is so popular now, and Joe DeSena, who almost went out of business with that company, almost went out of business because he called it Peak Race, and the product was exactly the same. It was the same race. And then he saw 300 and he saw the Spartans, and how there was this camaraderie with the Spartans, and it would feel so good to call yourself a Spartan, like all the sports teams in high school. So he called it Spartan Race. And if you complete a certain level, you get to call yourself a Spartan. And if you're really hardcore, you get to go to Sparta, and all of this stuff. And the company soared. And I think that was the main change, I mean, just by giving them a group identity, right? So if instead of networking and being your business card guy, maybe say, once a month, I'm going to pull together a group of people who could really help each other and have an interesting, kind of dynamic, and come up with not just a random name, but a name that stands for what they do. Maybe have an activity attached to it. Maybe have, you could make it even simple and corny, but it works. You go to a certain kind, let's say you go to Sri Lankan foods and you call us the Lankan Society, or whatever, right? It could be something that simple. People will start to identify with that, and a team, and everyone wants their team to win, as I said, right? Instead of everyone trying to get one over on the other one and get what's theirs, people are going to be looking for ways to get every member of the team to win. And if you have the right people on that team, it goes a long way.
Just a quick personal story there. So 300, this is for Sparta, right? That's a line from the show, from the movie, right? My kids watched it, when they were growing up, and they were like, when they would get into their game, whatever, basketball, whatever, this is for Sparta.
Yeah.
I was sitting in the sideline. I go like, guys, listen, we were the other side. And now you're saying this is for Sparta.
Oh, are you?
We were the opposing side.
You mean are you?
I'm half Persian, half Turkish.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, you're Persian.
That's both sides of me is the other side of that coin.
There's actually a story by I think it was Sherman Alexie, who's a Native American. And he said he was sitting in the movies as a kid watching a Western, and he was cheering for the cowboys. And then he realized he's like, I'm Native American, I'm
what am I doing?
Yeah, exactly.
I had to explain to my kids, no, we're the other side. You're cheering for the wrong guy here.
That's actually really funny. That's very helpful. This is for Sparta. Yeah, those kind of stories and identity markers can really be powerful, and that's also just very funny. But yeah.
By the way, just related to that, also another personal story.
Oh yeah, Turkey and Persia, yeah, and Greece. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. Definitely the other side. Yeah, yeah.
But by the way, my,
Sorry.
my
Yeah.
son and my nephew actually did the Spartan race. It was
Oh
at
wow.
City Field 1 year, so that both of them had participated. I just joined them on as an audience member, but they actually did the entire race
That must
at
have
City
been
Field
brutal.
in New York. Yeah, it's brutal, but they're young
Yeah.
guys, so
Yeah.
they were exhausted, but it was fun for them
They could do
for
it.
doing
Yeah.
that. Now you talked about the in the very beginning, and I want to just circle back to it because one of the mantras that I have in improving and growing businesses is test, learn, and optimize. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what it is. It doesn't matter if the idea is coming from a CMO, CFO, or the junior marketer that just came out of college. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Experiment, experiment, experiment. And you talked about the importance of experimenting with in creating hype. Can you explain that? What do you mean by that? Because I have a very different meaning in my head when it comes to test, learn, and optimize, when it comes to e-commerce and growing revenues and stuff like that.
No, but I think it's similar in its own way. I mean, you're looking at data, but I think the basic, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the basic idea is similar. So, I mean, something that I'll often say to people, kind of joking, but kind of not, is that no marketer knows what they're doing. And they laugh, and including me. And what I mean by that is that you can have a good body of knowledge, you can know your stuff, you can know how the technology works, you can have a knack for it. But the idea that you're going to do A plus B plus C and get D, and that's going to work the same way it did a year ago, I don't know. Market conditions have changed, right? Different industries are different. What I do know, though, is that just doing random stuff doesn't work either, because there's some predictability in terms of how human beings will respond. I call them hype strategies. Other people call them influence. We know that scarcity is hard to resist, right? For example. So what I say is use those strategies of mass psychology as an umbrella. Don't just do random, oh, we're going to throw spaghetti against the wall. Think of like the mass strategies of how people respond, but within those strategies, do as small an experiment you can to still get a response, but know that you're as likely to be wrong as you are to be right. And the trick is to kill the experiment as quickly as you can, while still, if it works, being able to accelerate and systematize, right? So like, an example is, I would write all kinds of articles when I wrote a column for Inc. And I knew the kinds of articles I wanted to write, but when I would do an article with a certain headline, that was hype oriented. It was, Simon Sinek is full of hot air. Here's why you should follow his lead. The idea being, this person you look up to and try to follow their advice. Maybe you shouldn't pay attention to their advice, but they're so popular, you should pay attention to what they do. I got 150,000 views on that article. I usually would get like 3,000 back.
Follow the message, not the messenger.
That's what I would do. So I wrote about 5 different articles with that headline and that theme, and they would always blow up. That was my first hype stuff, So then I said, well, what if I took this theme and I applied it to other things? So I started a hype newsletter where I didn't recommend normal books. I recommended weird mass psychology books. That became popular. So I got into this pattern. Every time I tried this certain thing, it would work, but I had to do that first step first, and it was small. And then now it's my whole company. But at the same time, I wasn't just gonna I see people who were like, you got to put out 3 videos a week. What kinds of videos, I mean, like just about anything.
And why 3?
Yeah, or like be consistent, or right. But it's like, why 3? But just about should it appeal to people in a certain way? Should it play with drawing lines in the sand? Should it be exclusive? What's the psychology behind it? So it's a combination. Understand what moves people, but know that the fact that you're going to just be able to reverse engineer the perfect, experiment to turn yourself into a superstar thought leader, you may get lucky on the first try, but you shouldn't expect it. You should be in a learn, like you said, collect data mindset.
It takes time for things to work, right? And people usually see the success after that
Correct.
overnight success that has happened. Some of those nights are, that overnight may be 50 years that
Right.
night. It was a very long night.
Right. But you also don't want to be, I agree 150%. And at the same time, you don't want to let that be an excuse for just randomly flailing around with any rhyme or reason. You want to walk the middle road.
Yeah, definitely. Now, what are some of the the initial steps you can take to start up a secret society? So if there's a founder that's watching the show, right? They have a startup. The business may or may not be up to $1 million in revenue yet. So it's the very early stages, right? And they hear you talking about secret society, and they go like, I'm in. What do I do? How do I get started? Are there also not only the steps, but are there also some industries? Because not everything works in every category, right? Where does it make sense to do? What type of not necessarily specific categories, what type of companies? And then what are some of the steps that they can take to make things happen or to start to at least taste it?
I don't really know what kind of companies. I mean, I think that most of the high level principles can work in any industry. When you start to get into really specific stuff, no, right? Like you can't walk if you're in the insurance business, you can't walk in with a silver wig the way Andy Warhol did, right? But you can still package yourself in the spirit of Andy Warhol. So I would say that the thing to think about, and this sounds in some ways really simple, is fun. I don't mean fake fun, like running through cones, like forced fun that like you go to team bonding experiences. I'm thinking more about if you're going to ask a bunch of adults to sacrifice their free time, which they could be spending with their families, make it an experience that has a certain amount of theatricality or color or energy to it, that it isn't just a drag, like sitting around a ballroom. So like, for example, a couple of years ago, I decided I wanted to have an event for all of the interesting, creative, entrepreneurial people that I knew. And I talked to my accountant, weirdly enough, because he specializes in creative professionals, like a lot of advertising agencies and things. And I said, do you want to have anything to do with this? And he said, I'll help you do the whole thing. It would be really great. So what we did was we did it in the, there's like a secret room in the Empire State Building. It's not really secret, but it feels secret because it's like their like room where they have events, but it's like sort of tucked away in a corner on a really high floor. So like if you open the window, you can like see the clouds there. So we had access to that room. So we invited them to become part of, and it was very temporary, but we called it the International Back Scratcher Society. You know, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. And we basically we sent them like a paper invitation in the mail, which no one gets anymore.
The reason, by the way, Michael, I'm laughing,
yeah.
The acronym is IBS.
Yeah, I noticed that afterwards too. Yeah. And with the food we ate, I think a lot of people had that afterwards. It was very rich food. It was really good. Very like a lot of cream sauces. So but yeah, we sent out an invitation. You know, we sort of like had little like back scratcher charms, you know what I mean, that we handed. It was like when they came through the door, we gave out little pins that they could wear in their lapel to be part of the society. And we had all kinds of, we had some of the biggest literary agents in the city, which were people I wanted to know at the time because I was shopping my book. We had big advertising people. And I think to this day, once in a while, people will come up to me and be like, hey, International Back Scratcher Society, you know? So I think that like just, yeah, we all need to make money and we're all doing these things to make a living. But if you can give someone the opportunity to put a little mystery, a little fun, a little energy into it, it goes a really long way, you know?
It does. It does. I mean, the thing is, I think in a society where people mostly, it's very transactional in my view, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you this. What are you going to give me in return?
And people pretend it's not that way. They speak about, oh, I give to receive and all this, but we all know what's going on.
Even when you're donating,
yeah.
let's say if you're very rich, you're donating, I don't know, $100,000 or whatever, $5 million to this thing. you don't, you go like, I do it for the goodness. No, you did it because your name is going to appear on that room that says this is the XYZ
and the
room.
tax write-off. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, given, I mean, everything that you told us about secret societies, what is your number one $100,000 or $1,000,000? Because this is your second time. It's $200,000 now.
Huh.
$200,000 expert insight into not only building but building a thriving secret society.
I would say, and this has served me really, really well, constantly be looking for opportunities to give things to people that are cheap for you to give up and very, very valuable for them. And what I mean by that is, I mean, I'll tell you a short story. When I was first starting out, before I had really codified these ideas, when I was just putting them together and trying a lot of things, I was one of the things I was doing, I was, I mentioned it before, I was writing for Inc. magazine. And at a certain point, PR people started to hit me up to write about their clients. So I had this meeting set up for me to interview this guy, gentleman who literally started a business from his garage that by the time I met him was doing, $500 million of revenue a year. And he started it by himself. And so we had this meeting and it was a perfectly good meeting. I mean, we went to a restaurant, I interviewed him, but we weren't like connecting on any really human deep level. And so we got up and it was cold and we were putting our jackets on. I mentioned it, something about it being cold. And he was like, not as cold as where I'm from. So he was from Indianapolis. I was like, why'd you move here? And he said, well, I finally got the business to the place that, it can more or less run by itself. I'm the chairman of the board, but I don't have to run it anymore. And he's like, I've always been a huge fan of live music, and Indianapolis doesn't really have a live music scene that's worth talking to, and New York does. And I just want to be part of that. Now, at the time, I mean, this was 11 years ago, I'm 45. So I was still sort of at the tail end of going out. I don't really do that a lot anymore, but I was at the point where I was still going to see bands. As you can tell from the examples I use, I'm a big music fan. I used to play in a band in New York in my early 20s. So I knew that scene really well. And I said, hey, it'd be my absolute pleasure to take you around, because I was doing that anyway. So cheap for me to give up. It was no skin off my back. All I had to do was take someone along with me and make a little bit of small talk. And I don't necessarily mean cheap financially. I just mean like things that are easy to do, For him, it was remarkably valuable because that was the whole reason he came to New York. So I call it personal arbitrage. It turns out that guy became my biggest mentor. He opened doors to me that I never would have had open to me, So, and it in some ways launched my career. So I think instead of thinking about networking, I'm going to do introductions for people. Have you ever you just get in the mail, you meet with someone the next day, you have 7 introductions and you're like, oh, I have to take these phone calls. This is a pain in the neck. I don't want to know any of these people, but I have to do it to be nice, Instead of doing that, keep your ears open and look for things that are easy and cheap for you to give up and incredibly valuable for them. Someone says, my daughter is really struggling to figure out what they want to do after college, and they're really interested in XYZ, and you have a little bit of knowledge there. Sit down with them for an hour. Give them an internship. That might be really cheap for you. You might be able to get some free work done and teach someone something. You do something for someone's kids, they will help you for the rest of your life, So if you can constantly be keeping your ears open and looking for bridging that gap, I can't think of, that's $1 million piece of advice, a $10 million. I mean, most of the great developments in my life have come out of taking that attitude.
I mean, that's so true that I can tell you, even in my close network, I'm not saying LinkedIn network, I mean close network, people who are on my cell phone, right? They would just randomly put me in a chat with another random person and say, oh, Sabir is the guy you need to meet. Why don't you, I'll let you guys take it from here. I have zero context into that conversation. But the thing is, there's a trust level that if they're handing the person off to me, that I would be able to help them somehow.
That's what you want to get to. Instead of just randomly throwing emails, you want to get to a level to someone where if they put you in a room with someone, they know it's going to be valuable. That's what you want to get to. Yeah.
So what's next on the horizon for you, and when can we have you back with a major update?
Oh gosh, I don't know about that, but I'll come back anytime. Yeah, lots of good things are happening. I mean, I've been